Welcome to this session on prayer practices and Julian of Norwich and the Cloud of Unknowing. What I want to start with today is the amazing resources that I've found in the medieval texts and faith experiences that are recorded in the history of our church. I love that the work and practices that I've found useful here in the 21st century in meditation and contemplation, and even in yoga, body movement, and mindfulness about God's communication to us through our bodies. I see that echoed. I see that kernels of it in so many medieval mystical texts. And in addition to that facet that's coming in from modernity, I also love how the medieval mystical texts, despite their reputation for being out there and being in some cases heterodox, which is to say outside of the bounds of what's generally been accepted in church and church history, I don't find them really to be heterodox. They've gotten a reputation for being that, especially in modern times, for being out there. And I wonder how much of that reputation and that line of thinking comes from a desire to be anti-establishment, that can feel more free or can feel more fresh, when I've found that the greatest sources of light and life are often in the things that are old. What a wonder it is that when God resurrected Jesus's body, he didn't make a whole new body. It was the old body reanimated. The holes were in his hands, right? That Thomas then stuck his hand in his side where that wound had been, or was still. Stick your hand in my side. And so God, I have found, does not make all things new by trashing what's old. He makes all things new by taking what already is and forming it, reanimating it, breathing his life, his divinity into it, such as he did with Jesus's body, not trashing the whole precious flesh of Jesus, but reanimating it, remaking, breathing his life in, allowing it to be again God in human form. So, all to say, I'm not sure that I've found things like Julian of Norwich, the Cloud of Unknowing, even Marjorie Kemp, to be totally out there and strange and disconnected or in a different vein than the spirituality that we practice today, or that's been handed down to us, or that's practiced by, as they put it so many times, Holy Church. That's a phrase that's used often, that we don't use anymore, or that I don't hear used often now, but I wonder if we could bring it back. So the practices that I want to share with you today, the Cloud of Unknowing is all about contemplation. That's its whole point. Telos, orientation toward existence, is about contemplation. And the way that it describes how to practice contemplation has so much to do with what we might now call meditation. And both of those pieces or words or names or practices are evidenced in Julian of Norwich's Revelations of Divine Love. She doesn't give as much instruction about how to contemplate or how to practice meditation in prayer, but she writes of her experiences while in contemplation and prayer. So she is giving a sort of eyewitness firsthand account, whereas the Cloud of Unknowing, which I've been studying more recently, is more of a how-to manual, giving you instructions about the do's and don'ts, the things to try and the things to avoid or watch out for. So join me in this exploration of contemplation, and we will also talk passingly about the rosary. So as far as contemplation goes, and meditation, and even yoga to a certain extent, because so much of what the Cloud of Unknowing talks about is the relationship between our minds and our bodies while we are in contemplation. The author, who is anonymous, so I can't, refer to that person, it's often thought to have been a monk. It was somebody who is very practiced in Christian contemplation, writing in a how-to manual, a letter to someone who is not as practiced, who is wanting more instruction and depth of knowledge of how to engage in this practice of growth toward God. Or awareness of God, right? God being all around us. It's really about becoming more aware of God in his presence already there in our lives, rather than going or reaching for something. And that's very much what the Cloud of Unknowing author would say. He talks again and again, or she, about how the imagination and the physical exertion, or the clenching with our body, or the concentrating with our minds, is not where contemplation is found, but that our effort can actually dampen our ability to contemplate. And that rings so true with meditation, which is, as it's often practiced today in the United States, which is where I'm familiar with it. And so the meditation that's practiced today, often in the United States, is about noticing what is happening in our minds. And as we notice it, it's kind of trying to remove ourselves from it, to observe what is happening in our minds, to see, oh, our minds are busy. Hello, busy mind, there you are. And then the mind is like, yes, but I need you to make your grocery list right now. And then the idea is, if you happen to be taken off by that thought and go off and start making your grocery list, that eventually you come back to that observation and you say, hello, mind, I am not going to make my grocery list right now. Right now, I am observing. I'm just gonna be here. And that can be so hard and antithetical to our patterns of thinking and our habituation of how we use our minds these days. But the muscle that we begin to build as we seek to observe what's happening in our mind, rather than just being in the swamp of our thoughts, allows us then, our mind will try to grab us away from this observation, but eventually, just like a toddler trying to go to sleep, our minds will calm, and they may continue to buzz a little bit, but it's a little bit quieter, decides not to bother the fact that we've decided to observe. And then we're able to, and this is where the Cloud of Unknowing happens. So the Cloud of Unknowing is this kind of space between our minds and God, that we just don't know who God is, and our work is to seek to penetrate this Cloud of Unknowing. And likewise, the author talks about this cloud of forgetting. And so that's what I've just described to you. The effort, since I've just said we shouldn't use effort, the freedom that we're offered in placing our minds under a blanket of forgetting, or a cloud of forgetting, as the author refers to it. And so then we're kind of operating in this liminal space, as we are meditating, contemplating, trying to find ourselves resting, sitting, being, dwelling, embodying silence in this place between the cloud of forgetting of all these earthly things and this cloud of unknowing that we want to understand. One of the quotations from the cloud of unknowing says to pierce the cloud of unknowing with a pure dart of love. One of the ways it tells us or suggests that we might want to do that is through mantra. It doesn't use the word mantra, but it does say choose a word to help your mind focus on. So as you're trying to allow that cloud of forgetting to settle, choosing a mantra can be a really helpful way that the cloud of forgetting suggests. That the cloud of unknowing suggests, and that as you probably are familiar with the word mantra, or maybe even its concept, it's a very commonly used meditation tool. The cloud of unknowing suggests using something like God, very simple, short word that your mind can come back to, grab onto. And God, of course, is not just a simple word, but it contains multitudes, right? And so that word can be that dart of love. You might want to choose a different word. There might be something in your life right now, in your scripture reading, or something on your heart that is coming up for you to use a different word instead. You don't have to keep the same word forever by any means. Perhaps peace, glory, love, a fruit of the Spirit, or Lord, maybe a different name for God, or even a phrase. You can use a phrase. The Psalms are full of great phrases. Be still, or know that I am God, or I am, or from Exodus, I am who I am. So we have all kinds of different words or phrases that might be helpful. That mantra can be super helpful. The other thing that I said that I would mention in our conversation today is the rosary. Might as well grab mine. So the rosary is a particular, you'll have seen one before probably. It's a necklace with beads, and there are particular prayers that are set to pray. So there's always one bead, 3 and 1 here with the crucifix or cross at the bottom, and then decades, 5 sets of 10 with a single bead separating those 10s. So there are, as you can see, 5 sets of 10 here. So the rosary has a special affinity to the devotion to Mary, the Blessed Virgin Mother of God. And so saying the Hail Mary in these decades, these sets of 10s, is usually traditionally what's done within Our Father at that singular bead. Anglicans, Episcopalians, other Christians throughout the world could choose to use different prayers. This is very much the same to the necklaces, which name I forget right now. In many Eastern religions, the 108 beads is one that's often used by yogis today. 108 beads around, and particular prayers that they pray. So this I just present to you as a tool, pieces of jewelry that remind us of God, that remind us to pray. The What Would Jesus Do bracelets from the 90s are in a way a rosary. They reminded us on our wrists to consider what Jesus would do, to bring and draw our thoughts back to God and to things eternal, up toward that cloud of unknowing, away from the cloud of forgetting, whenever we saw that bracelet on our wrists. And so likewise, the rosary, whether it's Hail Marys and Our Fathers that you say, or whether it's some other short prayer that you choose, maybe that you compose, or that you learned when you were a child, or that you've learned recently and love, that you repeat over and over and over and over again. That can sometimes be weird for some people. They're repeating a prayer that you're not like thinking through and, like chewing on it every time you say it. Maybe you are. I don't usually manage to do that. I'm often just like saying it with my mouth. But one of the things that I've found about repeating things with our bodies, whether it is walking, whether it is saying words, whether it is hearing words, that the repeating things with our senses, touch, hearing, speaking, which is, not a sense exactly, that has a really powerful effect on our minds, on our brains, and that has a really powerful formative effect on our souls. And so when we pray, even if we are not plumbing the depths of our mindfulness, every word that we say in our prayer, although that would be wonderful, and sometimes that happens, it can still have a really positive, grounding, stabilizing, and even revelatory effect on our relationship with God. So let me know what tools you have used or are interested in using or are curious about trying. And I'll look forward to continuing the conversation with you.